Provide public testimony, Mr. Will Parkinson. Mr. Parkinson, if you could begin by introducing yourself for the record before you begin your testimony. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Will Parkinson. I'm a private citizen and local business owner and a cannabis proponent. So I'm here to speak in favor of this bill. So brass tacks is, the people of Guam are ready for legalized cannabis. There are a couple things I want to address: safety concerns, economic impact, and tourism, lab testing, and employment protections. First off, safety. The dangers of legal cannabis are settled science. Basically, there are none. States that legalize do not turn into post-apocalyptic hellscapes as its detractors would suggest. There are 0 cases of fatal overdose from cannabis. 0. It is virtually impossible to ingest a fatal dose of cannabis, and for the think of the children crowd, rates of use among teens has gone down significantly as data pours in from multiple states. According to an article from Psychology Today, the reality is that to date, not one jurisdiction in the US or elsewhere has seen a marked increase in teen drug use following the relaxation of marijuana restrictions. Not one. Both Colorado and Washington, the pioneer states of marijuana legalization, have actually seen drops in teen marijuana use following legalization. The drop in Colorado was particularly dramatic. Despite the wave of legalization, nationwide teen drug use is at a 20-year low. In fact, if you really want to see teen usage drop, the most effective way, the data suggests, is to legalize cannabis. So for the think of the children crowd, if you really want to reduce teen use, let go of your pride and your prejudice and do the responsible thing by legalizing cannabis. I know it's counterintuitive, but sometimes the Lord works in mysterious ways. Second, the economy and tourism. It's no secret that legalizing cannabis will show a massive windfall in tax revenue for the growth of this new industry. Actually, scratch that, it's not a new industry. From the taxation of an already existing industry, the marijuana trade on Guam is thriving. Everybody knows somebody who consumes cannabis, and it is readily available. And currently, it is untaxed. Guam is not seeing a dime of the massive, massive industry that's been growing under our noses for decades. People are paying $1,000 per ounce at the street level. $1,000. Imagine the revenues the government and the people of Guam are missing out on because we want to pretend that the cannabis market is not already thriving. Imagine the benefits to consumers in price reduction. Many of them are medical practitioners, medical patients who have nowhere else to go but the black market. If we had an open competition instead of price fixing among the local criminal organizations, not only would the island see some badly needed revenue, patients who rely on the black market would have instant relief if we introduced legal cannabis to drive prices down. Not only that, we would cut out the legs of criminal organizations that rely on cannabis as a cash crop. Help patients, help the government, help the people, and undercut criminals? When put in those terms, legalization seems like a no-brainer. This is the elusive obvious. Even among tourists, especially from Japan, there is a massive demand for it. Japanese tourists are willing to pay $200 for a single 1-gram joint. $200. In fact, coming to Guam to get access to cannabis is one of the dirty little secrets of the tourist industry. If we told Japanese we can offer them good cannabis at fair prices, tourism would skyrocket to this island. And speaking of tourism, I have a bone to pick with Guam Visitors Bureau. They should be ashamed of themselves. How dare they oppose cannabis by citing the family-friendly nature of Guam when our primary tourist strip is littered with bars, brothels disguised as massage parlors, and strip clubs. And they have the temerity to say that we are a family-friendly place, like the people of Guam are stupid and we can't see what's going on in front of us? A wise man once told me that when someone uses a variation of the argument, think of the children, it's because they are appealing to emotion rather than logic, and they don't really have a rational argument to stand on. Be better than GVB, and to this body, be better than GVB. If you really want to make Guam family-friendly, do something about all the bars, brothels, and strip clubs, then talk to me about being family-friendly. Until then, they could spare me their crocodile tears. The growth potential for the cannabis industry and tourism on Guam with limited competition is the sort of thing that comes once every generation. Do not squander it with inaction. Which leads me to my next point, lab testing. When I was an aspiring public servant, I told people that my metric for success wasn't passing cannabis legalization. That part is easy. I'd be shocked if this bill didn't pass knowing what we know now. The knowledge is readily available supporting my arguments, and open-minded millennials are coming into voting age. The time is right and the people of Guam are ready. My metric for success is when I actually walk into a store and purchase cannabis legally. Until then, any legalization effort is just a do-over of the failed implementation of the 2014 Legalization Act that still do not have any relief for the medical community. So in the interest of getting actual product to store shelves, I would implore this body to consider putting a moratorium on lab testing until the cannabis industry is actually up and running. We are trying to put the cart before the horse when it should be the other way around. If we build the cannabis industry, the labs will come. Many states have shown this is a working model. Arizona, Montana, Rhode Island, and Michigan don't require lab testing. Some states have started with lab testing and then later implemented it after the cannabis industry has been erected. I am not against lab testing, but I am against lab testing as a barrier to getting the product on store shelves. A product, mind you, that the people of Guam have said they wanted. Legalize and open the shops first, and then build the labs. If no one will build a lab, empower a government agency like the Government of Agriculture, or have somebody work in conjunction with UOG to open a lab and sell it as a government service. Whatever this body decides to do, do not let lab testing be the impediment to getting cannabis on the market. Testing labs have no standardization and are rife with shoddy practices. Who watches the watchers? There are lots of tests going around, but there's no standard methodology for testing. A lot of these labs are notorious for fraud and juking their numbers. Why get into bed with a lab industry when they have shown to be marginally effective? The labs should not be an excuse to hold up cannabis on the shelves. And finally, my last point is we need strong worker protections for the cannabis users. Cannabis lasts in the body for up to a month to 90 days. Testing cannabis in employees is discriminatory and ineffective. Employers have no business telling employees what they can and can't do in their free time. Employers can't tell me I can't drink a beer in my off hours, so why should they be allowed to dictate if I can consume cannabis in my off hours? If people are showing up loaded to work, by all means, can them. But if they are using cannabis responsibly, testing cannot distinguish whether they used it this morning or if they used it 2 months ago. That's the big problem with the urine test currently employed by GovGuam and is standard practice in the private sector. The test does not check for active use the same way we check for active use in alcohol, but it actually tests for byproducts of use within the last 30 to 90 days. Rendering the test effectively useless for enforcement purposes and discriminates against lawful, medicinal, and future recreational use. Medical patients especially should be protected from testing positive from dismissal for using medicine they need. I highly implore this body to support worker protections for people who consume cannabis in a responsible manner. Time is of the essence. Once the floodgates break, we aren't an early adopter, then we will be too late. Right now, with federal prohibitions, we have a completely protected local industry we can develop since no outside competition can export their cheap cannabis to Guam. Any cannabis on Guam is 100% local. But once it's federally legal, then that dream is over. Our cannabis industry will be dominated by stateside and clever foreigners, and our dream of having an industry all on our own will die an inglorious death from inaction. So take action and get this product on the shelves. The people of Guam will be watching the same metric I'm watching. It's not enough to pass legislation. They will judge you successful when they can buy it from the store shelves. The people will be watching, and there will be a political price to pay for opposition and failure to implement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parkinson, for your testimony.